It's a bitter pill to swallow.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Bitter Pill, November the 6th, 2025. Means nothing to you if you're watching this in 2026, but it means something to me. Because we managed to get another one up, and on time.
It's a bitter pill to swallow.
For those of you who are new to the broadcast, my name is Kirk Sheppard. I am a mental health counselor and a former professional wrestling personality, and I've figured out a way to blend those two worlds into this podcast where we talk about all things mental health, self-interest, self-help, and with a little bit of a professional wrestling overlay.
Pull back the curtain, tell them how it's done, but don't ruin the illusion, 'cause that ain't no fun.
I just love this song so much. Kayfabe, of course, is the terminology that we use in professional wrestling to separate us from the marks, the people on the outside of the business. And today I wanted to talk to you about some wrestling psychology before we get into personal psychology. So today we're going to talk about the heel turn. So in wrestling parlance, the babyface is the good guy, the heel is the bad guy, and sometimes the good guy goes bad. And we call that a heel turn. And I'm going to talk about 3 examples of the heel turn where we, let's move me out of the way a little bit, where we can see a slow burn, a surprise, and a shock. And this is just 3 examples from my fandom when I was coming up watching professional wrestling. So the first one was the slow burn. Back in 1988, we saw the birth of the mega powers. Macho Man Randy Savage, yes, the man from the Slim Jim commercials, and Hulk Hogan joined forces. They were the mega powers. And Miss Elizabeth was Macho Man Randy Savage's manager, and she was stuck in the middle of the 2 men. Randy got jealous, and for a whole year, we told this story of the 2 of them uniting, the slow burn to the big explosion. Then we saw WrestleMania 5 in 1989, where the 2 of them competed against one another. That was a slow burn heel turn. Savage went from good to bad, and it took him a whole year to get there. But then we also have the surprising ones that come out and make us sad. Andre the Giant was a beloved superstar across the world. And when Hulk Hogan won the heavyweight title, Andre was his friend. But at some point, Andre decided that he wasn't getting the title shot because he was Hulk Hogan's friend. And he joined forces with Bobby the Brain Heenan, who many think got in Andre's head. And he challenged Hulk Hogan on Piper's Pit to a match which became one of the most famous matches in wrestling history, WrestleMania 3, in Pontiac, Michigan. At the Pontiac Silverdome in front of 93,000 people. Largest indoor attendance record at the time. But watching Andre go from good to bad pretty quickly was surprising and made many of us sad and also made us afraid for Hulk Hogan's safety. And then there's the shocking heel turns, the ones that come out of nowhere. We didn't see them coming. And that's when Hulk Hogan turned bad. 1998, it was Bash at the Beach. I believe it was 98. WCW. The NWO had taken over, and they were the big, huge bad guys who were doing all the damage to WCW. And Hulk comes down to the ring to make the save, and he ends up turning on Randy Savage and becomes the newest member of the NWO, and that was shocking. The thing about all of those heel turns is that they make the audience grieve. We're grieving the loss of the guy we cheered. The good guy is no longer our friend. He's no longer our favorite. And we're going to grieve that loss because grief lends to pain. Pain leads to anger. And in wrestling, anger leads to money. And the whole point of wrestling, of course, is to make money. Just ask Carl Anderson all about the money. Why does it work? Well, because in all things storytelling, connection to the audience is what makes us care. And so if we are invested in a good guy who then becomes the villain, we want to see him get what's coming to him, right? That connection makes a difference. So here's our takeaway from this lesson today. Once we lose something, whether it's the babyface turning bad or any other kind of loss that we're going to talk about in the book club section on grief, we need to realize that grief leads to pain, and pain can often lead to anger. And now anger doesn't make money in the real world. It does in storytelling, it does in wrestling. But it doesn't in the real world. In fact, it leads to more pain. So we're going to talk about grief in a different context. But the takeaway is that when you lose something, of course you're going to feel it, and you're supposed to.
It's the Bitter Book Club. It's the Bitter Book Club. Book Club.
But the way you lose things, or the degree to which you feel it, makes a difference.
'Cause that's the bottom line.
So the Bitter Book Club is following right now my book Soul Audit, which you can find on Amazon or anywhere you get your books, or at kirksheppard.com. We are on chapter 12 this week, Grief. Nothing's missing except what's gone. Here's the big idea, one of them anyway. Alignment, which is what the book is ultimately about, is getting yourself aligned. It always requires release of some kind. Alignment always requires release or letting go. Every version of you that grows will leave something behind. Every version of you that grows will leave something behind. Grief and growth are dance partners. They cannot operate without each other. Well, they should not operate without each other. You should grow from grief, and you should grieve when you grow. Well, grief really is not only death or tragedy. People hear grief and they think funeral, or they think sad about somebody dying. But it's the emotional process, really, of integrating change. So grief can be a breakup. Grief can be the loss of a job. Grief can be the loss of the Mickey ear that I wrote about in my blog this week. If you haven't checked that out at kirksheppard.substack.com, you should. It's really when we have a change and we have to integrate it, that is what grief really is. It's the process by which we do that. It's adjustment, not punishment. It's messy, nonlinear, sneaky, and often disguised as fatigue, frustration, numbness, or nostalgia. I have a client who had a very profound insight one time in our session, and she decided that grief wears many costumes. It shows up in all kinds of different ways, and it was important for her to have that realization because what she was dealing with, what she was feeling in her body, was actually grief. Now, there's all kinds of griefs, different types of grief. There's the what-if grief. What if this had happened? What if I hadn't done this? What if, right? The grief of regret. There's also professional grief. Well, what if when you have to leave a job, when you have to make the decision to say goodbye to the company that you've been with or the people that you've worked with, or career paths. Sometimes you have to say goodbye, and that's grief. There's routine grief. These are the things that we have all the time, like grieving the seasons. Some people right now are grieving summer because it's so dark so early. That is a routine kind of grief. I will be grieving the loss of Christmas when it's over. It's a minor grief, but it's still a change, and I'm integrating into the new season. And there's the deep loss grief. Those are the kind of things like the death of a spouse after 50 years. And that often, sometimes even leads to the person who lost someone passing away from grief, right? They are so sad that they cannot integrate the change because they don't know what to do without their partner. But every type of grief asks the same question. What needs to be honored and what needs to be released? What do we hold on to and what do we let go of? If you're leaving a job, you might hang on to some of the coworkers and still stay in contact, but you get to give up the day-to-day, the grind, the things that drove you crazy about that job. Sometimes the grief of becoming, which is integrating change, right, is hard and painful, but not all pain means something went wrong. Sometimes it's the ache of outgrowing a space, a role, or a version of you. Excuse me. Sometimes we have to pay attention to that pain and identify it as something besides what it looks like on the surface because, again, grief wears many costumes. You can love whatever it was you're leaving and still move forward without it. It's not betrayal, it's evolution. Some people have to do that with addictions, right? You could love smoking cigarettes and still leave it behind. And most people who actually want to stop smoking will act like it's disgusting and nasty and they're sick of it. But really, if they were being honest, they're going to miss parts of it. They're going to miss the nicotine, but they're also maybe going to miss the smoke breaks with their coworkers, right? I mean, there are things that we do get out of all behavior. And so when we are leaving something behind, we need to acknowledge the things that we're going to miss that were not necessarily the bad parts. When we're aligning, when grief surfaces, we should ask ourselves, what is this loss trying to show me about who I am now? The process of becoming is ongoing, is kind of the point of soul alignment, soul audit. And so when you are going through this process of grieving, trying to find meaning in the loss and the feelings is really impactful. Am I clinging to something that once served me but no longer fits me? I have clothes that I regret that I don't fit in anymore, but I have to say goodbye to them, for instance. But I also have people in my life who sometimes I have to say goodbye to because they no longer are making me a better person. Sometimes we need to ask what truth is trying to emerge beneath the sadness. That should be a big question and a hard one to answer. Grief is information, though. And it's your body saying, I have changed. Because your body is really where feelings manifest and then live in physical form. I'm learning more and more about somatic connection between body and trauma, for instance, or body and loss. Grief is your body saying, I've changed. I recognize the change and I've noticed something's different. I like the idea of duality. I like the idea actually of spectrums, of multiple possible right answers. Multiple choice questions are my favorite, especially when all of the above is the correct answer. Because you can hold on to both grief and gratitude. You can be thankful and also sad. You can be holding on to both missing and moving on. You can hold on to sadness and peace. It's the yin and the yang of those things that make us human. And that process is what leads us to alignment. Here's your soul audit for the week. I've quietly grieved something that I shouldn't have hurt. And shouldn't is in quotes there on purpose because that's a sarcastic way of saying who determines what should hurt and what shouldn't. How about this? I miss a version of myself I've outgrown. I've let go of something good because I couldn't stay aligned. I've learned grief and gratitude and can share. I've learned that grief and gratitude can share space, or I can name something I've released that made room for something new. That's how you will know that grief is helping you grow. Here's our audit to action for the week. Grief isn't a flaw in your process. It is the process. Grief is not a flaw in the process, even though it hurts, it's painful. Grief is the process. So ask yourself, what loss have I survived but never acknowledged? Where am I mistaking burnout for grief? And what story am I ready to release with compassion? What narrative do I tell myself that I need to change and let go of? What ways do I let grief and the grieving process grow me? Here's one way you might do that. You might write a short letter to something you lost, a role or a place or a person or a version of yourself, and just say goodbye and then let go of it. You don't have to carry it alone anymore. You can still say, I am me and I am still becoming. Letting go doesn't erase love. It honors it. Sometimes in a relationship, we have to say goodbye to somebody who we care about deeply, but the pain they cause in other ways is too great, or it's too toxic. And so letting go doesn't erase the love that you felt. It just honors the good parts of it. Next week, we're going to talk about forgiveness, which is really tied to grief and loss. That's chapter 11. We'll go back in the book and catch up. But if you have questions about forgiveness, I'd love to hear them. Email me at professorbitterman@gmail.com. or comment in the Patreon if you're a member of the Good Brothers Patreon over there in the wrestling world. But that's it for this week's topic of loss, grief and loss, of letting go, of dealing with the heel turn. Sometimes we have people in our lives who betray us and make a heel turn, and it feels like grief because it is. And we have to learn how to deal with that. So hopefully this is helpful for you as you're dealing with different feelings, as you grow, as you leave things behind, as you say goodbye to things that no longer serve you. And with that, we will say goodbye for the week. And next week, we'll talk about forgiveness. Check us out over at the Substack, kirksheppard.substack.com. Get on the YouTube channel if you're not already. You can catch this podcast on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get podcasts. And hope to hear from you. I will see you next week right here on The Bitter Pill.
It's a bitter pill to swallow.
The Bitter Pill with Kirk Sheppard is part of the Talk and Shop media empire. The preceding video was produced as educational and entertainment content only. Kirk Sheppard is a licensed mental health therapist. However, the material on this broadcast should not be considered clinical or representative of his professional work in that context.
It's a bitter pill to swallow.
Professor Bitterman is a fictional character and may not reflect his actual views and opinions. For more content from Kirk Sheppard, go to kirksheppard.com. Follow him on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to his Substack and YouTube channels.
Please subscribe to the Talk and Shop podcast on YouTube for more content from the Good Brothers.